first of all, it's not crazy, it's fantastic. Right. My name is Stuart Langridge. Good morning. And I'm going to talk about cross-platform mobile app development. I build apps a lot. Could you see this?
Not really. Not what you're ready for.
Am I allowed to move this around?
Yes. Causing some problems.
I've got to broken the whole vibe of the thing.
Do you want to go wireless? Make the life easier.
Yes, you do. Thanks. Yeah, that's on.
Yeah.
Turn that right now.
Yeah.
Hello. Now this works. Now that he's turned it down to like minus nuclear level or whatever. Right, there you go.
So,
Alright, how's it going?
Have you turned it off?
hello. Yay! Your technology, it fails. Right, so I'm going to talk about building apps, but I build apps a lot. How many of you have a mobile phone? That was a really easy shot, to be honest with you. How many of you have downloaded apps for your phone? Yeah, you know, it makes sense. How many of you built an app for a phone? Really?
Yes, really.
Why are you here watching me talk about it? You know about this stuff. Anyway, the important point about building applications is that I'm an Ubuntu user. Any Ubuntu users in the house?
Yay.
Yeah, that makes sense. My designer's a Mac user. Any Mac users in the house?
Yay.
Get out.
Hi guys. Hi everybody.
One person going, me, and everyone else like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And for mobile phones, I've got an iPhone. Any iPhone users?
Yay. No.
Quietly again. Sorry. Android for the Nexus 4. Any Android people? And I've got a Firefox phone. Any Firefox users?
No.
Any Firefox users who don't work for Mozilla? So, I want stuff to work on all the platforms because I'm running all the platforms. And realistically, those that are not somebody, is any BlackBerry users?
I have
That's a good thing because I was about to say I don't care about your platforms.
I thought you said it was cross-platform.
Not that cross. BlackBerry just makes me cross, not the same thing. So, we sat down, myself and my designer, and we designed a game called Riddling. Has anyone played my game?
Yes.
Has anyone finished my game?
We hate you.
It is, I have to say, quite hard. But it's designed that way. So, we sat down and we decided to start with Riddling, basically because it's quite a simple game. If you haven't played it, CryogenicsOrg/Riddling, and it's available for Android, for Ubuntu phones, it's available for iPhones, it's available for Firefox OS. So you can give it a go, play it, see how you get on. It is quite hard, as I say. But what I'm going to talk about here is what we decided to do, the ways we decided to do it, and why we decided to do it that way. The first thing, to be honest with you, if you're going to build something which exists on all of those platforms, something already exists which does, the web browser, right? So that technology exists everywhere already. This is a useful thing to bear in mind. The other point is that Riddling is a very simple application. Those of you who've played it will know. Those of you who haven't played it but will play it after this talk will soon find out. It's not that complicated. Basically, you get asked a question and you type an answer in. Call for Duty, it is not. So, it looks like that, right? So you have a clue and you have a box to type the answer in and you have a button to press to see whether you got it right or not. So, this sort of thing is, you'll hear a whole bunch of people when you talk about mobile app development say, well, you can't use web technology because it's all slow and rubbish and everything, but seriously, it's a button, right? It's not hard. Riddling doesn't do anything very complicated. So part of the reason we started with it is because we were trying to get a sense of how you develop for multiple platforms. And part of the goal here, those of you who who are scientists will know, you keep everything simple the first time you're doing it. So we picked middling, at least partially because it doesn't need to read your address book, or it doesn't need to sign in, and it doesn't need to use Game Central or whatever. It's just a nice, simple game. Even native people like that idea. So we decided to use web technology because it's available on all platforms, and because this is relatively simple, it gives us the opportunity to bring that to everything. But we still wanted the games in the app stores. Right? We could have just put it on the web, and I'll get onto that later. But we wanted the game to appear in a place where when we say someone here's the name of it, they could go to the Firefox Marketplace, or go to the Google Play Store, or go to the Apple App Store and buy it. So how many of you have heard of a thing called PhoneGap? How many of you have not heard of a thing called PhoneGap? About half and half. So if you listen very carefully, you can hear an Adobe person in marketing crying their eyes out, the half of you haven't heard of it. What PhoneGap does is, if you build essentially a web application, a local web app running with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, it lets you bundle it up into a native app wrapper. So you get a thing which looks, which is a native application which you can upload to mobile app stores, but it's just basically a web browser without an address bar. So it gives you the chance to use web technologies to build something, but not, and then to make it a native app on every platform. So you get it in the app store, so you get discovery, so you can charge money for it. And it's a jolly convenient way to be terribly cross-platform. Precisely because you build the app once, and then you poke PhoneGap into it, and then it's available for each of the platforms. So in theory, for complicated reasons, the PhoneGap project is actually called Cordova, which is a city in Argentina, if I remember rightly. And in theory, you download Cordova, and then you type Cordova create and then project name, and then Cordova builds it for a specific platform, Cordova runs it, and that's all you have to do. So all you've got to do now is just do that, and you've got an app which runs on every platform in the world, right? No. Not quite that easy. So, first thing, talk about building the application. If you are, a reasonable portion of you are Linux users, yes? If you're using Cordova on Linux, you can, I mean, I've got the Ubuntu logo because I don't care about Fedora, but this guy down here does. If you are a Linux user, you can use PhoneGap on your Linux machine and build Android applications. Not a problem, that works perfectly well. But that's because the Android SDK is itself supported on Linux. PhoneGap doesn't magically know how to build Android applications, it uses the existing Android tools to do it. It does exactly the same thing with other apps. So, if you use PhoneGap on Ubuntu or PhoneGap on Linux, you can't build iOS apps because we haven't got the iOS toolchain. You need Xcode for that, but for Xcode you need a Mac because it's important to Apple that if you want to build something for their phone, you also have to buy a laptop from them for 1,500 quid. Now, I personally consider this to be unfair and possibly illegal, but there you go. You also can't build for a bunch of other platforms. So if anyone got a Windows phone?
At the moment. I'm still waiting on the Ubuntu phone. I'm holding out hope and I've given up on Android.
I was going to say one guy, but I should say the one guy.
That's my name.
Congratulations, right?
Did you buy it?
Yeah, it was 50 quid, it was dirt cheap.
What were the odds? Yeah, so if you want to build a Windows Phone app, PhoneGap supports Windows Phone, but you can't build Windows Phone apps on Linux, because again, we haven't got the tool chain. You need... Don't sit there like, oh, maybe you can, no. It would be a nice thing you could do, but in practice, the Windows Phone people have taken roughly the same approach that Apple did, that they've only made the tools available for their operating system. So realistically, to build Windows Phone applications, you need Windows. Which puts you out of luck. You think, hooray, I can build cross-platform apps, and then you think, but I can't actually build them for half the platforms because I don't have the tool chain. And then the PhoneGap project, after they got bought by Adobe, came up with a thing called PhoneGap Build, where what you do is you take your HTML and CSS and JavaScript, stick them in the zip file, and upload it to their server, and they build the application for you, presumably somewhere in the cloud. they've got a Windows machine and a Mac. You know, someone's Mac will get plugged into the cloud in some way. Presumably quite a long cable. I don't really know how this works, right? Ask a network engineer. And then that builds, so they'll have a Mac there somewhere. Maybe it's Mac OS X Server, you can be the only user of it. And that builds your PhoneGap app as an iOS app using the Apple toolchain, and then lets you download the file. So you know, for Android you get an APK, for iPhone you get an IPA, same kind of thing. So the PhoneGap build project concept works fantastically. Totally happy, because it means that now I, as an Ubuntu user, can build applications for everything the PhoneGap supports. It's not quite that easy. There are platforms which PhoneGap supports, which PhoneGap build doesn't. And PhoneGap itself, being an open source project and developed very much in the open and by a collaborative team, tends to support some platforms better than others. But in practice you can do a pretty good hit across most of the stuff that you want to do by using PhoneGap. So, in addition to a lot of the smaller stuff, I need to talk about little things to do with your app that come up when you are cross-platform developing that wouldn't do otherwise. So, the first one is mute. Riddling, as a game where, you know, as I say, not a particularly complicated graphical game. You type in an answer and you press a button, it tells you whether you got it right or you got it wrong. If you got it wrong, it plays a little sad noise. The problem is that nobody realises that it plays a sad noise until, but it's quite a quiet sad noise. Nobody realises that it does that until they're playing it under the table in a meeting. And then it goes, and I released the game, and within 2 days I had that bug report in almost exactly those words 9 times. Gratifying to find out that everyone's playing my game instead of working. So, you remember the crash? That was my fault. But the important point it brought up is that people said, well, we need a way of muting the sound. Which I honestly hadn't thought of it. It hadn't even crossed my mind. And you get this... So how many of you have used an iPhone? It has, one of the interesting things I have discovered about the glorious, shiny iPhone, it has 2 volumes. It has one for the ringer and one for media. Right? So, which is, in theory, quite a good idea. I suspect Android does as well. In that you want to be able to turn down the volume of videos but not having shut your actual phone up. Right? Good idea. But if you're in the riddling game and you turn the volume down, no sound is playing, so it assumes you're turning the ringer down. So, I got this bug report saying, how do I turn the sound down? And I went, oh, I don't know. Because we don't want the fact that you have riddling up to mean you can only adjust the media volume. Yes? But it doesn't play background music. So most of the music isn't playing. Now, if you deliberately get the answer wrong, have it play the sound, and while it's playing the sound, turn the volume down, it turns the right volume down. But that's obviously stupid. So after going backwards and forwards to people a bunch of times and spending a bunch of time A, drinking, and B, blaming Apple for being rubbish, it was, well, how are you going to fix it? So I just put a mute button in the app. I feel terribly guilty about this. But the app itself, Riddling itself, now has a mute button at the top of the, on the toolbar at the top. And admittedly, that's a rubbish solution, but it's something that I just didn't think of. And you've got to think about that sort of thing. Android seems to work okay. If you turn the volume down, it seems to turn the right one down. I don't quite understand, to this day, why it works on one platform and doesn't work on another. But it's that kind of tricky little thing that means that the first thing you have to do is test across loads of different platforms. How many of you are web people, would you say? How many of you web people have heard the local Peter Paul Koch, PPK?
Of what, sorry?
Peter Paul Koch. No, he is, yay! That's what I'm Jamie. He's a guy who spent a long time building a site called Quirks Mode, which, again, he will be very sad. And he's like quite a menacing guy with massive hair. right? But he spent a long time documenting the quirks and trials and tribulations in different browsers. And one of the things that he put out, his most recent blog post, was only 2 or 3 days ago, said that if you're doing web development, do you test in Android Chrome? Yes? No? Those of you who do web development? Do you test in all 9 versions of Android Chrome? And importantly, this is not version 37, version 36. These are all version 37. There's just 9 different versions from different manufacturers, all of whom patch Chrome differently. And that's one browser on one platform, right? So the whole problem with doing cross-platform development in general is you have to test everywhere. You sort of think, well, you know, I'll develop it and I'll test it here, and it'll work everywhere, and it just doesn't. Excuse me, sorry. So the next thing I'll think about is keyboard size. So there's a Wriggling user interface again, and when you tap in the little text box, the keyboard comes up. But obviously, you don't want the keyboard to overlap the go button. So, how tall is the keyboard on the phone this is running on? Is there a way to ask the phone how tall your keyboard is? Answer, no. If you are in, this is a web development thing, but if you're in Chrome and the keyboard comes up, Chrome treats the page as only being the height that remains. It shrinks the page. iOS Safari does not. Sorry, dry throat. So that's really tricky, and the way I solved it is professionally by saying if you're on an iPhone, the keyboard is 425 pixels away. Which I was supposed to say. Check the question.
Just to point out that with iOS 8 and the advanced keyboards, you could be, your keyboard size could change from moment to moment depending on what the user liking does.
And importantly,
Can you repeat the question?
oh, sorry, yes. Yes, the point that was made was that iOS 8 now does custom keyboards, which Android has done forever and ever and ever. Now, the sizes of custom keyboards tend not to change very much. I don't believe Apple will let you say, hey, custom keyboard, which is the size of the screen. But if you think, certainly for iOS 8, you get the keyboard now, but you also get suggestions at the top. You know the thing that Android's done for years and years and years, the word suggestions. iOS 8 now does it, which means that when I said, if you're on an iPhone, hard-code the keyboard to be 425 pixels, it's now taller. So that's already broken, and I am being punished by instant karma for doing it. But that's the thing, you know. Web fonts, this is another brilliant one. If you're a web developer and you're using web technology, you can, instead of bundling fonts with your application, you can use them from somewhere else on the internet. This has a bunch of useful benefits, like you can use fonts which you're not allowed to distribute. So people can offer a font, which you're then allowed to use in your application by linking to it live on the internet, but you couldn't download that font file and stick it in your app because you're not allowed to, because there are licenses on these things. So I use a bunch of web fonts for Wriggling because, I mean, I don't care. Type your own for everything. My designer is really, really, really serious about typography. So we spent a bunch of time going backwards and forwards on which fonts to use. I said, you can pick any of these that don't cost actually money to license. I'm not paying until the end of time, just so you can have the curves or the A's be different. But I'm prepared to use a different font because you want it, no problem. So we started using web font, and then I discovered that if you download the app, and then you start it up, but you don't have an internet connection, none of the text loads. And since, I mean, you see from the game, it's nothing but text, a grey bar. So that was a problem. And it's a problem which I've still not quite resolved. But we will do. But that sort of thing, this is the crossover between, hey, this is web technology, great, because one of the things about being a web page is you can reasonably assume that people have access to the internet, because otherwise they couldn't see your page, right? This is changing now as we look at sort of offline first and things like that. People are going to need to start thinking about this sort of thing more and more. But if you combine the fact that you are on an app and therefore not necessarily on the internet, with web browsers psychotically bad handling of fonts, it occasionally breaks you, which is what happened here. There was a question, sorry.
Yes,
Yes.
with CSS you can cascade the fonts.
You can. The problem, the point was with CSS you can cascade the fonts. You can name a font and then name the next one and name the next one. And if it genuinely doesn't have the font at the top of the stack, then you're fine. If it's still trying to fetch the fonts at the top of the stack, instead of falling down to the second one, it just hangs with no text until it's downloaded. If you're on a tube train, it never downloads. So, no text for you. At which point people start up your app and say, I thought you said your app was hard, it's just a grey box. Which looks less than professional, right?
Is that the same on all browsers? Is that the same on all browsers?
It depends how old. If you're an old enough browser you don't support web fonts at all, then you'll just fall through as if those fonts weren't there, and then you'll get the Times New Roman version, which works fine actually. Hooray, fallback. The problem is the same that it's always been. If you want to show an image, and the browser doesn't have the image cached, and it needs to fetch it from the internet, and the internet is slow, it will take a while before that image shows up. The thing that's different about fonts is that if you haven't got the font, none of your text shows, and that's, in theory, most of your images aren't critical. Having some text at all tends to be a bit more useful, especially if your game is now about text. Question?
We're going to have
Hold on a sec, Mike's coming in.
all your web fonts in a microphone.
So you could put all your web fonts that are online in a CSS file that is also online as overrides to default styles. So that means that if you've got no connection, it can't download a CSS file that has references to things that are also online.
I agree with you. Now that sounds complicated. At that point I'm going to go, you know what, just pick a different font and I'll bundle it. The hell with it.